Hello, everybody. This is a total pleasure for me. We're just chatting backstage a bit, and I've got loads of questions, but I don't think I'll need them. What I've found fascinating is this whole event, as with any industry event, talks about purpose, resilience, and all these things that really brands tend to have, and Tanni has in spades. So let's start off and talk a bit about, I guess, resilience. You know, your whole career has been about resilience. You succeed in places where people like you weren't really meant to. So what does resilience mean to you?
So I've had two careers, one in sport as a Paralympian, and now I work in politics. So both require quite different levels of resilience. In sport, the training, everything you have to do is quite dull and boring, really. And then you get to compete in some amazing places around the world. And I think it was my second Paralympics. I worked out how long I'd been on the track, and it wasn't very long. And then that just gave me a real focus for actually, in a 4-year cycle, to compete on the track for 6 minutes at Paralympics. You've got to do all these thousands of hours of training, and then you win and you lose and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. So, growing up, no one expected me to be an athlete. And then I was older, I don't think anyone expected me to go into the House of Lords. So I think it's kind of quite interesting. I've never been put off by not seeing people like me. But actually, I think it's really important that, probably because I'm just stubborn and willful, so that's never put me off. But I think for a lot of people, we still just don't see disabled people out and about necessarily in the world or in advertising or on TV. And we're saying, up until about 2 years ago, every single person I'd ever seen on TV or radio, I had their phone number in my phone. Not because I have an amazing contact book, but we don't have that 6 degrees of separation. So, I get quite excited if I see a disabled person on TV that I don't have their phone number. And I try not to kind of be a stalker to try and get it. But, that representation is just probably not where I would have hoped it would be by now.
I think what's, again, fascinating about this conference and about talking to you is that inclusivity is something that every brand talks about. And we were just talking backstage about the fact that you tell the audience what you see someone in a wheelchair or an advert and they're not sitting right.
Yeah, so it has changed in the last few years. And about 18 months ago, there was a lot more disabled people using adverts, which is brilliant. But then you also see some brands who think, right, I need a disabled person. What's the best way to show that? Right, I'll have a wheelchair user because it's really obvious. And they'll get a non-disabled actor and stick them in a wheelchair. And you can probably 9 times out of 10 tell that they're not a wheelchair user by the way they're sitting in the wheelchair, because it would just be impossible for them either to maneuver that chair around or they're sitting with their knees under the chin. So it kind of feels quite tokenistic at times. So also I get very excited when I see a real disabled person in an advert, because it's that authenticity. So in the same way that nobody would black up anymore, we call it cripping up. Okay. Cripping up is just not where it's sort of a bit of the way there, but it's not then. About 18 months ago, there was a big increase in disabled people who saw an adverts. And it's really difficult. If you're doing a TV advert or something, you've got, I don't know, how many seconds to show every kind of representation and inclusion possible. But, I think it does matter. We're chatting about the purple pound. That is worth 274 billion a year. And quite often it doesn't feel like disabled people are in any way targeted to help spend that money with certain brands.
I just found that, no brand in the world would want to be accused of blacking up. That's kind of what you're accusing them of, really. What damage is this doing in terms of brands not representing disabled people correctly?
The cripping up damages a brand because then disabled people will just, a lot of disabled people would just not look at that brand. And also what we know is a lot of disabled people are very loyal. So if there's a brand that does sort of attract them, they will stay with that brand. For me, if I go to, a chain of restaurants where, the disabled toilet is quite often used as a store cupboard, if I have a bad experience, then I probably wouldn't go to any of that chain. And my husband would probably accuse me of cutting off my nose to spite my face. Be thinking, well, if you don't welcome me through the doors, then why would I spend the money that I can spend? Why would I spend it there? Why wouldn't I spend it somewhere else? And I think that's the challenge, is that, you know, trying to be inclusive, and it's the right thing to do. It's a really hard balance of, you know, like trying to fit a jigsaw together, of making it happen.
Let's talk a bit about, I guess, another big theme here is authenticity. I think everything you said really hits the nail on the head, that if people can't see themselves in the real world, be that women or, you know, someone who's black or someone who's in a wheelchair, how can they, you know, have the self-worth they want? And advertising helps. Advertising, again, as we've seen here all day and yesterday, advertising drives culture.
Yep.
So what do you want to see from brands in terms of how they're, you know, positioning your community, I suppose?
I mean, that authenticity, I think, is really important. So, you know, Paralympics is an amazing movement. You know, I got so much of my platform from being an athlete. And, you know, there have been clothing brands that have, you know, gone into that world, not just sponsoring the team, which is really important for games time, but so if you look at Nike, what they did, really subtle stuff where they just started having mannequins in the stores who were leg amputees. And that is not difficult to do. And certainly, you know, lots of people I know were suddenly going, actually, they might not be a leg amputee, but they might have a family member, or they start sort of shifting to those brands. And it's that kind of subtle stuff. It's not sort of a big label, we've got a disabled person. It's the kind of that what I would say is basic inclusivity. It just makes a massive difference. So I grew up in a world, so the only disabled people I saw was Sandy Richardson on Crossroads and Ironside, who are both non-disabled actors. And, you know, that is changing. But it's things like, you know, Coronation Street, EastEnders, you know, those programmes are having authentic disabled people in them. And not as a big storyline of, you know, this is how my impairment impacts me. It was just as, you know, part of the story. And those sort of things really help the rest of society, you know, beyond, you know, just saying, okay, we need a different character. And that's quite exciting when you see that, because, you know, that has a really positive impact on young disabled people coming through to see kind of representation in lots of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, what are you most excited about, and what are you most kind of fearful about looking ahead in this frame in the next few years with everything that's going on in our world at the moment? That's a big question as well.
The wider world. I mean, every day that we're not about to enter World War III, I mean, I'm not sure I ever kind of thought we'd be where we are in the wider political world, or the British political world's a bit odd at the moment. So I just think, you know, the impact Trump's had, which has been, you know, quite immediate in some ways in terms of equality, diversity, inclusion. You know, I know some companies are saying, right, let's just cancel our EDI projects, let's just not do this. You know, people are changing their bios on social media, and you suddenly dial back and you go, all these things that I thought we were doing really well on, there's suddenly a bit of a panic. And I think, you know, for me, the brands that hold firm on that, and, you know, you might have to do things in a slightly different way. Because for me, the brands that dialed back from it so quickly go, that's not authentic. You know, and maybe, you know, in the bigger political world, you know, those decisions, you know, might be quite safe for now. But again, they impact lots of people. You know, and we're chatting about women in sport. You know, where women's sport is now, it's like the opportunities are huge. So 10 years ago, you couldn't get women's kit for football kit, rugby kit, whatever. You know, they've now realised that women need different football boots. So and it's not just about flogging, well, it kind of is about flogging stuff. But, you know, the Premier League teams have done amazingly well with the women's game. You know, like Arsenal, they've just embraced it and done it and and there's massive benefits from doing it. So that is not tokenistic. It feels really authentic in terms of what they're doing.
Let's talk a bit about politics. Because you transitioned from elite sport into politics. You told me the reason why. I think it's a law thing. But I guess, what are the differences, especially putting this in the frame of this audience and advertising brands, you know, going from that environment to the one you're in now? What are the biggest changes you saw in terms of leadership and all those sort of things?
I mean, sport's quite selfish. So yeah, you do have a team and you have coaches, but ultimately, you're doing it for you, and there are nice bits if you win medals along the way, which is great. But I actually did a politics degree, and my plan was, when I retired, was to do law conversion and become a lawyer. And then I had a chance to go into the House of Lords, which is quite sort of different. Remarkably similar in a lot of ways. You spend a lot of time reading briefing sheets, and you get 2 minutes in the chamber.
Okay.
And my life is still based on time. The difference in politics, I'm an independent crossbencher. Nobody tells me how to vote. The good and bad of that is the best and the worst thing, because every time I vote, I have to make a conscious decision what I'm going to do. But in terms of, a lot of the stuff we're doing sometimes feels like we're playing catch up.
Okay.
So like online safety, we're looking at AI legislation, we always feel like we're a little bit behind the curve. I'm fascinated by AI and how the world is going to change with that. And actually the impact it can have on lots of people, if there's digital inclusion, can be really positive. But it could also create lots of divide. So, but politics is interesting. We have a whole language that the outside world don't always understand. So if you think you've got rules in any of your organisation, we've got rules for what colour carpets guests can stand still on at certain times of day. It changes every day. And it only becomes afternoon when the mace is in the chamber. So Monday and Tuesday it becomes afternoon at 2:30, Wednesday's 3, Thursday's 11, and Friday's 10. And when you say why, the response is normally, well, we've done it for 700 years. Do you want to change it? Well, maybe just a little bit. Yeah.
That's one of my questions, I guess, about change, because this industry is driven by change, driven by technological change that's speeding up every day, and how you've seen change. When you're embedded in trying to change the views on disability in general society, I guess you're embedded in trying to change how sport operates in your field. Now you're at the House of Lords trying to change the way the whole society works. So what about the speed of change in those three different areas that you've seen as most effective?
Well, as an athlete, I would have wanted the Paralympics to be huge, because that would make life better for me. And I was lucky, I grew up in Wales and we have our own media, and my earliest success was at a time when Wales were playing really badly at rugby. So, there's a lot of sliding doors moments. And a lot of that change came, I worked on the bid and delivery for 2012. Okay. That was unbelievable. And, you look at Seb Coe and Paul Dighton, who led delivery. They were really bold, so on sponsorship. They said you could only sponsor the Olympics if you sponsored the Paralympics. Did really, really bold stuff that everyone said wouldn't work, and then it did. They allowed one exception for the Paralympics. So 2012 raised the bar. But there's always more. I'm quite impatient. So as soon as you've done one thing, it's like, right, we've done that. Okay, what's next? And the resilience from sport comes in politics, because you have to keep, you might be trying to get that far and you get an inch and then you get another inch, and then so pace of change in my world can be incredibly fast or incredibly slow, and you never know which it is, and you never know when there's an opportunity to do something differently. So it's fascinating. It kind of pulls you in, and as long as you remember the Palace of Westminster is not the real world. Okay. That's really important, because it is just so not the real world. I mean, we have a lot of gold, like proper gold on the walls. Yeah. We have wallpaper that's £1,000 a roll. I mean, to be fair, it's up for 100 years. But you've got to remember it's not the real world. Yeah.
What's given you most personal satisfaction of all the worlds that you've kind of triumphed in? Sport, politics, public service?
There's loads of different moments in sport, and I think people assume, if I was asked for my top 10 moments in sport, they'd expect medals. And some of them are, but some of them have just been races where I've felt I've done really well. My husband's a wheelchair racer as well, and I came really, really close to beating him once. That was massive. But in the final half marathon, And in the final sprint, he got basically the men's elite pack couldn't drop me. It's a bit like cycling. And in the final sprint, he got all the men in the squad to sit round me so he could sprint for the finish line. That was quite a robust discussion at the end. I broke the world record for the half marathon, really pleased, but threw a very expensive crash helmet at him. So sorry, but there are all these like moments. So sometimes it's like a really big thing. There's a piece of legislation I worked on that we got across the line in the most boring way ever because nobody disagreed with it. And so sometimes people think it's like these really big things, but sometimes it's a whole combination of things that make a difference. And I think sport taught me, it's all the stuff. You've got to work hard. You've got to be creative. You've got to, there's ups and downs, and all that transfers. Like in any job, you've got to put the work in.
So we'll take it back to this room and this event. Marketers, what do you think brands can learn from, not from Tanni, but from someone like you, someone that's had this amazing success, both in elite sport and then gone and transitioned into a different industry totally, such as public service? What are the characteristics you think, if you look at yourself dispassionately, do you think have led you to success and to be able to transition so well across both? What can marketers learn from that?
There's loads of people who work hard, there's loads of people who are talented, there's these sort of moments of luck. I think the thing for me is the honesty of how... So my Paralympic career, 25 years, 5 Paralympic Games, 11 golds, 4 silvers and a bronze, 35 world records, is 19 and a half minutes.
Yeah. In total?
Total.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, actually, the world records would add a bit of time. My medals on the track at Paralympics is 19 and a half minutes.
Wow.
So I think that's the bit of how much is really important. I'm a bit of a drama queen, so everything's really important.
Yeah.
And there's lots of levels of that. And I think it's figuring out what's really important, what you're really trying to do. And that, for me, helps me in the stuff I do now. Because I get pulled over. I'm really bad at saying no to stuff. I love to do different things. But trying to figure out what is the 1, 2, 3 things that you want to change. And then that helps me find my focus. Yeah. And good people. I'm very privileged. I have tons of really good people around me. So I don't need to be expert on everything. I've got an opinion on everything, like everything. Some of them don't need to be shared with the world. Yeah. But make sure you have really, really good people around you, because then you feed off each other and you can just do so much more. I had amazing training partners, and I've got amazing people who support me in the work I do. So a whole bunch of activists who are brilliant, apart from one night late in the chamber. They did start playing Snog, Marry, Kill with ministers in a WhatsApp group, and it was like, no, don't do that. But yeah, it's getting good people around you.
Amazing. So look, what does purpose mean to you? After all we talked about, what's purpose? And again, I get back to the fact I've heard purpose mentioned by every brand under the sun over the last couple of days here.
Yeah.
But for you, all you've achieved, what is purpose?
I don't want some of the young people coming through now fighting for the same rubbish that I was. So for me, it's about trying to make things better. And there's loads of different ways to achieve that. Some of it's legislation, some of it's not. Some of it's talking to you guys about what you do, the impact that you can have. So the impact you can have on society can be huge. So I think it's, for me, it's about waking up every day and thinking, okay, what am I going to do today that could make a difference? And that's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning and keeps me going. And I think at the point I don't think I've got purpose to do that, then I'm going to retire. Okay. But not for a bit yet.
That's the answer.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard. It's a really hard question about purpose. Like, I get a lot of people saying to me, so what do you do? What do you do? And you go, well, I do this. And so, for me, it's, I do a lot of campaigning work about trains. Lots of very dull technical legislation and guidance and things. And actually, what I want to do is I want to have the same miserable experience of commuting as non-disabled people have. And if I have that, then I've won.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Sounds good. Also, looking for someone with purpose, runs through your life and all you've achieved, do you think every brand, from a baked bean brand to a toilet roll brand, should have purpose, needs to have purpose? How important is purpose to every brand out there?
I'd like it to. I mean, brand, part of it is it's about selling stuff, but it's about doing it, I like to think, in the right way. And I think that's the change I've seen. Yeah, sorry, I should have said it's red. No. They'll be chucking us off. If there were medals for talking, I would win. Yeah, and I think over the years what I've seen is that brands do have a purpose. The ones that are successful don't just talk about it, but live and breathe it. And it comes from the culture, from the top. Probably some of the best leadership team I worked with was around the 2012 games, where we had Seb Coe, who led the bid and delivery, Paul Dighton, who we joke, he was Goldman partner. He took many millions of pounds pay cut a year to be chief exec of the games, and it all came from them, and it filtered down, and they took people with them, and that was the most amazing thing to be part of, because their purpose was delivering a stunning Olympic and Paralympic Games. And that was at the heart of every decision they made. And both Seb and Paul, did not need to be the brightest people in the room, and would listen. And that skill of listening, not just hearing, was so important to delivering what will be for years and years just the best ever. And then when you get to work with brilliant people, then you can kind of learn from it. So I guess somebody said House of Lords is a bit like school. I mean, not the school I went to, but I went to a comprehensive in South Wales, but we have a lot of oak. But you actually you're told when you go, learn something new every day. Yeah. And that's part of the culture of the Lords, is that, you learn something every day. And I think that's really important to what I do as well.
Look, it's been an honour talking to you. I think we've heard the real meaning of purpose down stage, so thank you so much.
Thank you.